Let's drill down on what we can expect from the new Chief of Staff. We're joined now by Counselor to the President, Kellyanne Conway. Kellyanne, I want to start with a question that my colleague Martha McCallum asked you on Friday, whether or not all of the White House staff will now report to the new Chief of Staff, General Kelly. Here's your answer.
That's just a pecking order question I think is beside the point, and here's why. We all serve the President and this country.
Respectfully, Kellyanne, I don't think it is beside the point. An awful lot of people in and out of this White House say the problem is there's a lack of discipline, there's an absence of a chain of command. So I'm going to ask you again, will all of the White House staff report to the new Chief of Staff?
So I will do whatever the President and our new Chief of Staff, General Kelly, asked me to do. And yesterday I was on Fox and Friends and said very clearly that if we can have protocol, pecking order, discipline, and a Chief of Staff that empowers the staff to succeed. I know that General Kelly has done that on the battlefield. I know that he's done that as a chief military aide to former cabinet secretaries. I know he's done it as a cabinet secretary. And so we have great faith that that will be done. And that is nothing about our outgoing Chief of Staff, Reince Priebus, who should hold his head high as he exits. Many great things happened in the first 6 months during his tenure, and I think that Reince will go down as one of the most successful and certainly longest serving RNC chairs, where as chair they were able to raise a great deal of money and improve a digital and grassroots operation that allowed the Republican Party to succeed by getting the House, the Senate, the governorships, the state legislatures. So I'm always a protocol and pecking order kind of gal. I'm a very deferential person. I've never addressed the President, even when he was a candidate, and as close as we are as boss and employee, I've never addressed him by his first name. I always addressed people like General Kelly as sir, and I also, with Reince Priebus, was happy to do what I was asked to do as a member of his staff. But I think so much of the Chief of Staff role also occurs outside of the building. There's a little too much going on right now in terms of acting like he's the personnel chief inside the building only. This is somebody who regularly interfaces with the cabinet, and General Kelly is coming from the cabinet. He will be talking to his peers about their different concerns, their different deployment of issues. And we've got a very active cabinet. It often doesn't get covered. He'll also be interfacing with Capitol Hill, where a lot of the legislative agenda has stalled. I think the chaos this week really was on Capitol Hill and in the Senate. Well, why, after 7.5 years, nobody jumped out of a cake and gave us health care reform in a silver platter, I don't know.
We're going to get to health care in a moment. I do want to talk, though, about the disarray inside the White House. You had Anthony Scaramucci and a profanity-laced attack on other members, not just one, of the administration of the White House staff. And so I just want to ask you directly, has Scaramucci, who said that he reports directly to the President, has Scaramucci, have you now been told you report to John Kelly?
I will speak with General Kelly and the President about that, as I'm sure Anthony Scaramucci will. I think we're all very curious and very excited to have our first formal meeting with our new Chief of Staff tomorrow. I've had a very brief conversation with him this weekend. And again, being able to solve the problems of this nation and doing it in an orderly and rapid fashion is really why we were sent to Washington. It's why the two people who were elected, Donald Trump and Mike Pence, and no one else, are there. So to the extent that we can do more and do it more quickly in the disruptive fashion of which we're accustomed to with Donald J. Trump, I think that having the tools in place is very important. But I talked to Anthony this weekend. I talked to Reince this weekend. Everybody's on the same team in terms of we're on the side of freedom and democracy, repealing, replacing Obamacare, lowering taxes, putting ISIS in retreat, cracking down on these gangs, sanctions on Russia, North Korea, and Iran. I mean, there's just so much that's happening. And I got to say, the swamp includes many people, many institutions, individuals, and I think calcified ideas that need disruption. And it includes folks also on Capitol Hill who, I don't know what they were expecting, Chris. Were they not expecting Donald Trump to make good on his campaign promise and the moral imperative of getting the 20 million plus Americans who have no health care coverage the relief they need, the 6.5 million who are willing to fork over money, $3 billion worth to the IRS rather than get simple Obamacare coverage? Where did they not expect this President to go ahead and do what he said he was going to do?
You've got to allow me to ask some questions here. I want to ask you about one more question on the administration, then we'll move on to health care. This week, the President continued to attack his Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, And when he was asked whether or not he's going to keep Sessions in his job or fire him, here was his answer.
I'm very disappointed with the Attorney General, but we will see what happens. Time will tell. Time will tell.
Does the president want Sessions to continue as Attorney General, or, as has been suggested, is he considering him moving over to replace General Kelly as the Secretary of Homeland Security?
Again, that's a personnel question that only the president can answer. So just on Friday, Thursday and Friday, you had Attorney General Sessions in El Salvador and you had President Trump on Long Island, both working toward the same goal, which is to stop these vile groups, these MS-13 gangs, who are murdering innocent Americans and bringing drugs and violence into our communities.
I
so you saw the President and Attorney General working at the same time. Well, he's working.
No, but I understand he's working. The question is he considering him moving over, if the immigration part of this is so important, to be the Secretary of Homeland Security?
I won't comment on that, but I will tell you that the president has expressed frustration about the recusal. So much has flowed from that recusal, and so much of President Trump's agenda flows from the Department of Justice. Many of the primary issues in the program he won successfully on go through the Department of Justice. And look at what's happened with this ridiculous Russian collusion delusion. You see all these journalists who built entire TV sets and lower thirds and screaming graphics and breathless coverage now slinking away this week, Chris, from the Russian collusion coverage. Why? Because you have everybody from Jared Kushner giving his meeting with the House and the Senate and giving his public statement. You have no there whatsoever. It's completely back. We were promised the next Watergate. We don't even have water polo. We don't have a watermelon. It's so ridiculous. And the only thing I can see happening with Russia right now is this fusion GPS matter. The Senate witness who said everybody should go look over there at what's happened, somebody being paid by the Russians to compile a damaging dossier on Donald Trump, again, filled with falsities and lies. Do you know how much time has been wasted away from the victims of Obamacare, away from the working men and the working women, and onto Russia?
Kellyanne, let's talk about Obamacare. The president put out a new tweet today. I want to put it up on the screen. He wrote, "Don't give up, Republican senators. The world is watching. Repeal and replace, and go to 51 votes, nuclear option, get cross state lines and more." Is that the president's plan? Stay on repeal and replace, change the Senate rules, end the legislative filibuster so that you can pass a fuller repeal and replace, including selling insurance across state lines?
The president will not accept those who have said it's, quote, time to move on. He wants to help the millions of Americans who have suffered.
Change the Senate rules, end the legislative filibuster so that you can pass a fuller repeal and replace, including selling insurance across state lines.
The president will not accept those who have said it's, quote, time to move on. He wants to help the millions of Americans who have suffered with no coverage. They were lied to by the last president. They couldn't keep their doctor. They couldn't keep their plan. We've met with the Obamacare victims at the White House several times now. They're real people. They're suffering. And when he talks about the 51 votes, the president is basically making the case that so many of the components of real health care reform, Chris, require 60 votes. The drug pricing, the selling of insurance across state lines, the associated health plans that allow those who don't get their health insurance through employers like you and I do or through government benefits who have been left out because the premiums are too high. Premiums have doubled.
Well,
you see in some states that there are no insurers left, so he will stick with it.
Okay. Failing that, and we should point out that both Republicans and Democrats say there's no chance they're going to change the Senate rules. Here's what the president says his plan is.
I said from the beginning, let Obamacare implode and then do it. I turned out to be right. Let Obamacare implode.
Failing repeal and replace, is that really what the president intends to do? Does he intend to cut off what are called cost-sharing reductions, which lower the out-of-pocket expenses for people, lower-income people? And what about, you talk about real people, what about the millions of people, while Obamacare is imploding, that are going to lose health care coverage?
So, Chris, I saw the comment from Mr. Schumer, Senator Schumer, about this. What is their plan to help? These CSR payments are being made, and we've already got an opinion by one court, because you have members of Congress who sued to say that under Obamacare, this money was never authorized through the Congress. And so they would like an opportunity to do that, which is, of course, the normal course of business.
So is the president going to cut off the CSR payments, the out-of-pocket payments? He can do it starting next month, this week.
Yes, he can. He's going to make that decision this week, and that's a decision that only he can make. But let's go back to what we're really talking about here. When he said yesterday in the same tweet, I believe, about the bailouts for insurance companies, bailouts for members of Congress, he's talking about the CSR payments. He's also talking about this really sweet deal that the members of Congress and their staffers have, where they are not beholden to the same health care that so many Americans say is unaffordable and unsustainable and untenable. And this is exactly what so many Americans hate about Washington, D.C. They feel like they have their nose pressed up against the glass, peering into the special interests, the swamp, the lobbyists, the folks on Capitol Hill. They want people to live under the same rules they do. And frankly, if people had the same rules on Capitol Hill, maybe they would have a stronger taste of what it feels like.